To share with you the keynote speech that I gave about what Juneteenth means to me. So I invite you to take a moment to just be in your body. And if being in your body doesn't feel right at this moment, just noticing, observing how your body is talking to you. And digesting the words that I'm about to speak to you. An invitation to invite in our ancestors. And not only to invite in our bodies, but our mind and our spirit. Invite you to imagine what it would have been like for you in this gender, in this skin pigmentation, in this iteration of you to live in 1865. To live in the United States during the Civil War. What do you imagine your life would be like? What kinds of freedoms would you have been given by birth? What would you have to fight for? Would your body have been policed? Would you have been enslaved? Would you have been allowed to have the role or the family that you have now? Where would you have been allowed to congregate? Who would you have been allowed to partner with? Who would have been allowed to be your family? How much power would have been assigned to your body and to your voice? And thinking about those years of the Civil War, it was a country that was deeply divided. In many ways, those divisions are still here. And I want us to lean into this Ubuntu philosophy of I am because we are, or I am only because we are. And how do we challenge the notion of individualism and think about ourselves as a people? And who of us have been socialized to think of ourselves as part of a larger collective with a shared history, maybe a shared culture, and who has been encouraged to think of individualism, that I am because I made it so. Inviting you to think about who all of your teachers are, and how do you see yourself in people? It's easier to not dehumanize when we see ourselves in people. And as we honor Juneteenth, how do we honor the joys, the sorrows, the violence, the resilience, the faith, the community, the resistance of the African diaspora? And I am only because we are leads me to the labor and land acknowledgement. I live on the ancestral and unceded land of the indigenous people, more specifically the Lenni Lenape people, a people who still exist here despite all the erasure. And that so much of the Lenni Lenape people was pushed westward. I acknowledge the uncompensated labor of the enslaved Black people, an unpaid debt that built the wealth of this country. I honor the exploited labor of Asian and Latina people and other people of the global majority that also helped build the wealth and infrastructure of what's now called the United States. I honor that colonization is a violent process that continues, and that we have an ongoing racial hierarchy in the United States with interlocking systems of oppression. I also honor that no person should be defined by the worst thing they have done, and that we all have a lot of work to do to heal from our ancestral and ongoing trauma to live into the ideals of collective liberation. So I honor some of those who came before me and the ways I stand on what they were able to build. So think about Frederick Douglass, a free Black man in 1852. who has this famous poem or writing, The Meaning of July 4th for the Negro. It's often remembered on 4th of July. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all the other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sound of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants' brass-fronted impudence, your shout of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him more bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. An interesting story about Frederick Douglass is that he had several conversations with Abraham Lincoln, because while Abraham Lincoln was focused on trying to unite the United States, which is part of what prompted the Civil War, he also wanted to abolish slavery, but he did not want to give Black people full citizenship. He actually wanted to send them back to Africa. And so we know that when we build intimate relationships with people, when we have contact with people who are different than us, maybe we have a different perspective. And so that relationship between Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln helped solidify this notion of working towards full citizenship for Black people. So in Texas in 1865, almost 2.5 years after Emancipation Proclamation, the state of Texas had not complied with the Emancipation Proclamation, so it had not taught its enslaved people that they were free. So Major General Gordon Granger gave this decree. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Interesting way to inform people that they are free after generations of bondage, of chattel slavery. So we know that Emancipation Proclamation started in January of 1963. And in January of 1865, the 13th Amendment was passed into Congress, and at the end of 1865, it was ratified. So June 19th, 1865 was when those enslaved in Texas learned that they were free. And it's pretty close to the summer solstice, and that's part of balancing that darkness with the lightness. And Texas was the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday in 1979. And Texas is also one of 9 states that celebrates the Confederate Heroes Day. So when I think about the Black intellectuals of 1800s and 1900s, I think about not only Frederick Douglass, but I think about W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, who are known for their co-founding of the NAACP, and Booker T. Washington. And I think about how these Black people, they all were fighting for liberation. And they had different ways of going about it. And they thought freedom meant different things to them. And so I think about how diverse Black people are, and that what they each value as freedom is different. So some people value economic independence, others value civil rights, others think education is the path. right? Some think, the abolishment of incarceration. So just thinking about how do we make space for all the different ways that freedom transpires. For some people, it is more rest, more joy, more freedom of movement. So if we think about the 1800s versus the 1900s versus the 2000s, the points tend to be similar of what people are striving for as a collective. So I'm going to share the 1967 Black Panther 10-point program and notice how similar it is to maybe what the Black Lives Matter movement of the last decade has been about, and the ways in which the Black Panther Party was viewed as revolutionary, as militant, maybe even as terrorists, and why people were afraid of what they were demanding. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want an end to the robbery by the white man of our Black community. We want decent housing fit for shelter of human beings. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. We want all Black people to be exempt from military service. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. We want freedom for all Black people held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. So there is much work to be done. So much of that is still stuff we are fighting for, to reduce racial disparities in the form of the wealth gap, pregnancy-related deaths, incarceration rates, transgender violence, education gaps, housing segregation. We can go on and on. So thinking about how divided we are now, and the resistance persists. And how do we think about finding a balance between rest and joy and resistance? How do we keep amplifying the voices of those who are the most marginalized? How do we continue to center anti-Black racism? And I invite you to think about, what are you willing to be an accomplice to? The status quo or collective liberation? It's good to have our tribes and places of belonging, and we need to learn to work with everyone. We need to learn to work with our neighbor. And I think about the words of abolitionist Mariame Kaba, who talks about hope is a discipline. It is something that we need to practice in our daily lives. So, my little elevator speech. Black people are amazing and diverse. Everyone should root for Black people to thrive. The United States has an unpaid debt to Black people for 246 years of chattel slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and a couple of decades of mass incarceration. There is an intergenerational legacy of racial trauma, resistance, and perseverance. We have to address racial disparities, ongoing anti-Black racism, voter suppression, and mass incarceration. We have to continue to work on treating Black people as full citizens in all the arenas. There is much work to do. Let's experience some joy and rest along the way. And let's remember, I am only because we are.